हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू द चैनल। दोस्तों, आज के इस पूरे सेशन में हम बात करने वाले हैं इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स के लिए कौन सा माइक यूज़ अपन करना चाहिए और कैसे करते हैं। इस वीडियो में आपको श्योर के डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स जो हैं फालिस सर आपको इस वीडियो में पूरा प्लेसमेंट समझाएंगे, कैसे आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं, कौन सा गिटार के लिए माइक यूज़ कर सकते हैं और कौन सा इंस्ट्रूमेंट के लिए बेस्ट माइक रहेगा। ट्विन प्लेक्स, आपको बीटा 98 PGA, आपको कई सारे माइक्स हैं जो आपको इसमें सर बताएंगे, पूरा आपको क्लियर करने वाले हैं। तो इस वीडियो को आप इन तक देखिएगा और मेरे चैनल को अभी तक आपने सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया तो सब्सक्राइब ज़रूर कर लीजिएगा।
The instrument to make sure if it will actually work. Frequency response curves for various microphones. So there are flat, you have tailored. So any microphone that has a high pass or a high boost are tailored frequency responses. And there are some mics in which you can adjust. So you can have them flat, or you can do a high pass, or you can do a high boost. So that is an adjustable frequency response microphone. In today's session, we'll have a look at violin. So we will start with violin. We will have a look at acoustic guitar, banjo, mandolin, and backpacker. And we also have, I believe, a ukulele for today's session. Part of this exercise is also that we're going to speak to the musicians about the instruments. So I want to know more about violins, about banjos, about tuning for these instruments, about the wood that is used for these instruments, and how it can change the sound. And another thing is violin versus viola. They look the same, but they have quite different sounds to them. So we'll have a little discussion on that as well. The number of mics that you use, again, this changes for studio or this will change for live. In the studio, you possibly you have the accessibility to use more microphones because it is a very controlled environment. But when you go live, you have access to maybe just one, at the most, sometimes two microphones. And, you need to make that decision very carefully. Proximity of microphones to the instrument. And today, in fact, we'll get a very clear indication of proximity effect because of one of the microphones which we are using, which we're using on the violin, and then we'll use it on the mandolin as well. So that's something we will check. Construction of the equipment of the instrument is also very important. So is it a wooden body for an acoustic guitar? Is it solid body? Is it hollow body? Is it made of wood? Is it made of fiber? Because you do get violins that are actually not even made of wood. They're made of fiber composite. How does that change the sound? Very interesting to know these various facts about these instruments. And last but not least, for string instruments is string gauge. Thinner strings give you a little thinner sound, but not necessarily, because there are guitar players that use extremely thin sounds but get a very large sound from it. But string gauge actually plays a very, very big part in the sound of the instrument. That's something we'll chat about. And as far as recording techniques, we can broadly categorize them into two. First one would be a single mic or a mono recording. And the second one will be like a stereo technique where you can use two microphones in an XY, or there are various other formats, like ORTF is another one. There are various concepts as far as stereo miking. And last but not least, we keep saying this every single time, is to, when you have more than one microphone, please check for phase. Okay, that is very, very important. A basic chart like this gives you an example of how the mic is placed and what kind of sound does it actually pick up from the instrument. So a very simple, this is just breaking it down and making it very, very simple. But you can replace this guitar with a violin, with a sitar, with actually any instrument, any stringed instrument that you want. Now, as you see in the instrument, this sound hole or this sound port in the center of the instrument, that actually acts like the amplifier for the instrument. So it's in different places for different instruments. For guitars, it is here. Any of these string instruments requires some form of amplification to actually bring the sound out. Otherwise, if it's like listening to a electric guitar. So in electric guitar, unless you amplify it, there's no real sound. Okay, so violin, they also have cutouts. Various, all these string instruments have some sort of a cutout that actually amplifies the sound. Now, if you have the mic in position A, okay, in position A, generally around 1 to 1.5 feet away, if you're in the studio, okay, pointed towards the sound hole, that's probably the most natural sound that you will possibly get from the instrument. In picture B, if you use a mini pickup microphone, so like a lavalier. In fact, today we are going to be using one of Shure's twinplex lavaliers for the violin, and it's quite interesting to actually hear what the violin sounds like with that microphone. Next is you can do a typical stereo miking. In this kind of form, both the microphones get a decent natural sound from the instrument, and the fact that you pan them gives you a little width to the sound. A last technique that's seen on most acoustic guitars is they actually have a mic that is built into the sound hole. It is, in fact, for everyone to know, it is very similar to a podium microphone or similar to a large, slightly large diaphragm lavalier microphone. It is very, very similar to that. And that is the microphone. Very often, if you hear some feedback from acoustic guitars, it's because of this, and that's because if you have too much low end in the signal, that low end can actually cause a decent amount of feedback. So that's something you need to be careful of. So mono, very simple, straightforward. Try and place the microphone as reasonably close. Give the sound some place to bloom, to actually some little resonance that you want to capture from the instrument. Point it towards the sound hole, and it should be pretty straightforward. A typical stereo technique will look something like this, where you have two microphones, you angle them at around 90 degrees. There are various angling options. So you can do 95, you can do 70, you can do 75. The sound changes slightly, but in principle, this is what it is. And you leave a little space between the microphones. So at least about 20 to 30 centimeters between the two. Because the more space that you give, the more, let's say, resonance and more natural sound of the instrument that you will capture. Now, yes, the stereo technique is more for studio, but I actually use the stereo technique when we record, when we do Israj for live shows or sitar. So we have two microphones that have a little space between each other, and we pan one to the left, pan one to the right, and we just get a much bigger, much more natural sound from the instrument. So this is a typical stereo technique. So here you can see it's done with an SM57. In the case here, it's done with a KSM 137. And this little stereo bar is made by Shure as well. So in case you want to do a stereo mic technique, you can have this bar and just mount two microphones on either side of it. So this is what that looks like. And if you're using, say, for a larger, I know here it looks like it's a choir, but the same principle will hold if you're if you're recording in a studio with an orchestra. So there is a rule that's called the 3-to-1 rule, which is basically if you are, say, 1 foot away from the talent, from the musician, and you're using two mics, the mics need to be spaced by 3 times. So at least 3 feet of distance. So as you can see here, it says 1x, so x is the distance, so 1x, so 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet, whatever the distance is, and then you leave 3 feet distance between the pairs of microphones. Okay, this serves as one main purpose because it alleviates phase related issues when you use multiple microphones in a typical situation like this. Okay, so this is called the 3-to-1 rule. Definitely be aware of this rule. And even if you decide to mic like a sitar live in a live show or an israj in a live show, this same rule will also come into play. So for today's instruments, we are going to be using the Beta 98HC. We are going to be using Shure's Twinplex. Twinplex, for all of you, is Shure's offering of a dual diaphragm lavalier microphone. Now the microphone is really tiny. and we've actually mounted it onto the instrument with a tiny sticky pad. So it's actually meant for sticking onto t-shirts. It leaves no residue, and you can actually apply it and remove it, like, many times without it losing its stickiness, or without losing its or without leaving a residue. Yeah, so we'll be checking out the Twinplex, the Beta 98 HC, which is this microphone here. We also have the PGA 181 and our good friend the PGA, the Beta 181. So these are the options if you want a clip-on or like a miniature, smallish kind of microphone. And if you want some of the larger microphones, then what we're using today is the SM27. So that's this microphone here. And the other options is the Beta 27, KSM 32, KSM 42, and the KSM 44. Yeah, so these are the various options in case you bring it into a studio situation. These are some of the pencil condensers that can also be used. So the KSM 137, which is this first one here, the KSM 141, the difference between, if you see on this, there's not much difference. You have the same, pad, you have the same high pass. The difference is that the 141, you can change the polar pattern. Okay, so it's a swappable polar pattern for the KSM 141, whereas the 137 is a fixed polar pattern. Then you have the very old and tried and tested SM81, and again here's the stereo bar